For a while there, I was able to bask in a lot of Korean success. You have J. Caspian Kang's profile of Stephen Yun, not to mention his GQ cover shot and profile. You have Vulture doing a piece on Yun's co-star, Yoon Yoo-jung. You have Alan S. Kim's crying video going viral as he accepts the Critics' Choice Award for Best Young Actor, and all of this in service of Lee Isaac Chung's new movie Minari, which is coming out to massive critical acclaim and hype, and this in the year following Bong Joon-ho's Oscar win for Parasite, and all of this amidst the rise of Korean soft power in the form of BTS, K-pop, and K-dramas. And in a blink of an eye, all of that is flattened with the spa shooting in Atlanta, and then suddenly the narrative has shifted over completely to the fetishization of Asian women, the rising hate crimes spanning the nation, the provisional nature of belonging for many Asian Americans, and Asian racism and hate through history, from Vincent Chin to the Japanese internment camps to the Chinese Exclusion Act. You have the hashtags, Stop Asian Hates, the rallies, the talking heads, trying to separate notions of misogyny from sexism, from the stigma around sex work, and even this idea of Asian American. I mean, what does that even mean? I don't eat Asian American food with my Asian American friends speaking Asian American, but at the same time, I find that a convenient sort of label to identify what I'm going through, even if I'm Canadian. And even that notion of Asian, the US Census refers to Asian as someone who incorporates the Far East, Southeast Asia, as well as the Indian subcontinent, but most people, when they're ordering Asian food, aren't ordering curry. And even within Asia, I mean, there's this notion of fancy Asians and jungle Asians, according to Ali Wong. Fancy Asians host things like the Olympics. Jungle Asians host things like disease. Ali's words, not mine. I get the collective power of identifying as Asian American, but sometimes I just want to center my Koreanness, and maybe that's just in response to the fact that for most white people, I'm just interchangeable. I mean, if you're angry about the Kung Flu, I'm as likely a target as someone who's Chinese or Vietnamese. And frankly, I'm just in my head about this whole thing at a moment where I just happen to be in my head about so many different things. So naturally, my first instinct is to create a Stop AAPI Hate reading list. And then I think, I'm so done with that. Asian authored books to explain Asianness, this performative reading to help white people become better at being white people. I mean, I appreciate Kathy Park Hong's minor feelings. I want her to cash all those checks for the service she is providing, this sort of balm for guilty white liberals so they can purchase her book to artfully place it aside their copy of White Fragility and How to Be an Anti-Racist, two books that they're also not going to read. And don't get me wrong, I loved Minor Feelings. I felt absolutely seen on its pages, and I appreciated her attempt at building something larger. It's just that in the wake of Black Lives Matter, we saw the sudden appearance of Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo on New York Times bestseller lists as informative texts to help people navigate this racially charged moment. And you had all these hashtag BLM reading lists that invoked authors like Toni Morrison, Kylie Reid's Such a Fun Age, Colson Whitehead's Underground Railroad, Octavia Butler's Kindred, Claudia Rankine's Citizen, Jesmyn Ward's The Men We Reaped. And hey, I love that we're shining a spotlight on these works, and I love the notion of diversifying people's reads. But on the flip side, you're adding additional responsibility to these works. Suddenly it's like eating your woke vegetables, consuming your diversity vitamins. I mean, I guess you should. You're not really going to enjoy it, but maybe it's enough that you bought them. And great. I love that the writers are cashing all these checks, but I am pretty sure these authors really don't relish the notion of being medicine for guilty white readers. I mean, it's basically high school English all over again. All these works that you're supposed to read. And you know, nothing burns the love of reading out of you more than this notion of books that you're supposed to read. Reading doesn't have to do some work. It doesn't have to be a scholarly article unpacking notions of identity. I mean, as soon as you create these lists, suddenly the books no longer have to be any good because they're being read to teach you something. They're not being read to be enjoyed. And I'm like, screw that. Here's a list of Korean authored books that I haven't already reviewed that aren't interested in unpacking the immigrant experience or the notions of Asianness or racialized experience for the white gaze. They're just out there simply being damn good reads that I really did enjoy. My top 5 list of Korean authored books that you can go out and support, but at the same time, when you read them, you will actually enjoy them without this worried notion that it's trying to teach you something. First off, it's Pizza Girl by Jean Kyung Fraser, which I think frankly epitomizes what I'm after with this entire list. I mean, Pizza Girl is 18, she's pregnant, she's driving pizza delivery, and she's harboring a secret infatuation for a middle-aged suburban stay-at-home mom who orders pickles on her pizza to placate her 7-year-old son. Seems pretty simple, right? Pizza Girl lives with her mom and her dopey white boyfriend, who are both super excited about the birth of this child, and there's no sitcom moment where the immigrant mom secretly hates the dumb white boyfriend that got her daughter pregnant, or the dumb white boyfriend trying to immerse himself in the culture of his in-laws and experiencing kimchi for the first time or something like that. Nope. Fraser's got bigger things in mind. Pizza Girl is just out trying to blow up her life. She's sneaking out in the middle of the night into the shed where her now dead father used to sneak off to, and there she drinks beers, watches infomercials till the wee hours. And Fraser just nails the voice here, this sort of overly nihilistic, yet over-infatuated, sometimes extremely extra, yet overwhelmingly numb characterization that in lesser hands would read like a YA novel exploring Asian Americanness. And that is so not what this book is about, nor is it self-conscious about not being about that, if that makes any sense. Anyway, Fraser is supremely confident, not apologetic. This is a kick-ass read that I thoroughly enjoyed, and like I said, epitomizes what I'm after with this particular list. The Disaster Tourist by Yun Cohen, translated by Lizzie Bueller. This book is made for TV serialization. This is all about workplace office sexual harassment, insta-travel voluntourism, massive corporations, the ceaseless machine of industry and how it steamrolls over individuals. Our protagonist, Yona Kun, works at a disaster travel outfit called Jungle. This flies in wide-eyed tourists to recently devastated areas after a flood or an earthquake or a massive sinkhole. And they're catered to in the lap of luxury in beautiful bungalows with crisp white linen sheets and rose petals sprinkled by the bathtub. And they get to go out and help the recently devastated people with good works like digging a well or laying the foundation for a new school. Well, Yona Kim is accidentally left behind when her tour leaves an island and she gets a glimpse behind the curtain. This book is just hilariously cynical, surreal. It takes this sort of meta turn at the end, and it reminded me of a recent scandal here in Canada, the Weed Charity, who have been alleged to award the naming of new schools in Africa to massive individual donors to much fanfare. And they unveil this plaque and everyone feels great. And then a month later, they unscrew the plaque and do it all over again for another massive individual donor. Anyway, it is frankly a crime if this book does not get picked up for TV serialization. I really did enjoy this translated work. Next up is Seconds by Brian E. O'Malley, which checks off our graphic novel portion of the list. And yes, the author of Scott Pilgrim is in fact Korean, French, Canadian. And while I never did read the graphic novel, I did really enjoy the movie, which perfectly cast Michael Cera, is a love letter to the city of Toronto and features no less than Captain America, Superman, and Captain Marvel. Now, I did read Brian Lee O'Malley's other graphic novel, Seconds, which features a chef, her restaurant, magic mushrooms, and the notion of do-overs. I mean, what more do I need to tell you? Just go out and pick it up. Aside from the Alice in Wonderland-like storyline, the illustrations are beautiful and they're just drenched in Technicolor. They're incredible to look at. And O'Malley's style and color palette may seem at odds with some of the darker themes that are explored in this graphic novel, but in the end, it just all congeals together beautifully. This is such an incredible artifact, well worth picking up. Run Me to Earth by Paul Yoon. This follows 3 orphans in Laos working out of an abandoned farmhouse turned into a makeshift hospital. They're riding their motorbikes around unexploded ordnance, retrieving supplies and patients for the hospital. And the book follows their lives as they're eventually separated and traverse the globe. Now, I'm one of those readers that can finish a book and a week later completely forget the plot, despite knowing that I absolutely enjoyed the read while I was reading it. And yet this book, nearly a year after having finished it, I can remember so many points in this with vivid clarity. So clearly, I swear I can smell some of those moments. I don't know how Yoon does it. It's this weird alchemy of words with a few words on the page can invoke an entire scene. And maybe it was just the headspace I was in at the time of reading it, but it was less reading the words and more like watching a picture being played out in front of my eyes. Just incredible. Yoon is so good at what he does and was able to evoke so many different feelings and scenes with this book. This is melancholic, abruptly violent at times, but beautifully done. Frankly, just prose as pure poetry, and I loved it. Speaking of poetry, our final selection is Dance Dance Revolution by Cathy Park Hong. By now you're familiar with Cathy Park Hong and her pivotal work, Minor Feelings. But I was first introduced to Cathy Park Hong in 2007 with this particular poetry collection that features a desert guide that speaks this funky patois of Korean, English, Spanish, and Ebonics that's just hella fun to read. I mean, there's this section where she waxes poetic about the fancy washrooms at this faux Russian hotel in the middle of the desert called the St. Petersburg. You can sit on the bidet and choose between Wagner or disco or perfume while you're taking a dump. And it's just so much fun. I love this notion of a made-up language and slang while still adhering to poetic convention and notions of meter and rhythm and rhyme. And she does it really, really well. And I love that in other works, whether it's the Nadsat that the Droogs speak in A Clockwork Orange or the mutant slang in A Dark Knight Returns. When it's done well, it is worthy of recognition. And yes, I do get that this poetry collection does delve into a little bit of the political. There is the Gwangju massacre as well as the history of pansori music. But again, I wanted to include a poetry collection here in my top 5 list. So there you have it, 5 quick hit Korean authored books that you need to read that aren't going to try and teach you something. Now, I've got a ton of reading that I need to get done in the next little while, so I'm hoping that I don't suffer any sort of reading slump. I've got the workbook club, I've got the Discord book club, I've got the quarterfinal round of the BookTube prize that I'm judging, and despite the fact that I intended never to have read Shuggy Bane in my entire life, of course it has to appear in my particular cohort, and of course all books I have not read previously, so it's a whole new list right there. I've also agreed to help out with the Festival of Literary Diversity, or FOLD, which in the before times used to be held just down the road from me. Of course, they're doing it this year virtually, and they've got an incredible list of speakers on the go, including Ian Williams of Reproduction fame, Eden Robinson of the Trickster trilogy, Shani Mutu of Polar Vortex, Francesca Equayazi of Butter Honey Pig Bread, P. Jelly Clark of Ring Shout, Sylvia Moreno Garcia of Mexican Gothic fame. Anyway, that's looking to be very, very exciting, and I can't wait to dive into some of those books. So like I said, a ton of reading, not a bad problem to have at any case. So that's it for me this week. I hope you guys all have a great week of reading, and I'll talk to you again soon.